Fox DHx2 used off pink bike. So yeah, it's got a 550/235 shock on it, so that's a 52.5 millimeter stroke, and it's a 210 eye to eye, and it looks like it's barely been used. It looks really good condition. I'm looking forward to using this to get the plushness on the bike in conjunction with the Cascade Link that I have on there. So I want to show you guys what the bike looks like before, what the bike looks like now with my current setup with the current Cascade Link, and what it's going to look like with this. All right, before we jump into the whole installation for this shock, I've done so much research trying to figure out if I can put a 52.5 stroke shock on this 29er, because the 29er, it's got a different leverage, not a different leverage ratio, but the way it goes into the stroke is different than the 27.5. So heads up, it's totally fine. You're not going to bottom out. It's not going to, tires not going to come back, linkage not going to come back and hit the seat tube. I've seen guys put up to 55 millimeter stroke on their Stumpies on the 29er. So don't worry about that. It's, you know, as long as you have the same eye-to-eye length, 55 is probably the max you can do with the Stumpjumper linkage. 55 is iffy. They say it might work. I didn't want to buy a 55 stroke linkage or shock and then I have to worry about returning it. So 52.5, I think that was enough for me on the 29er. I think I'll be happy with it. In conjunction with the Cascade Component linkage. If you don't have the linkage on your Stumpjumper, you can probably put 55, fine, no problems. You don't have to worry about any clearance issues or, you know, something hitting the bike when it comes back. Another thing I did, just in case, I just put my seat post up a little bit. You know, just set the dropper up a little bit just in case it does bottom out once I start hitting the trail, and maybe I'll go back and adjust it as needed. So to recap, you can use a 52.5, a 50 millimeter stroke shock on this Stumpjumper with the Cascade Link, no problem. Using a 55 millimeter stroke with the Cascade Component Link is iffy. If anybody's tried it, let me know. I was just a little nervous to do that. And then also I went with a coil because I wanted something, you know, super plush and something a little bit different than the air shock. I almost bought the DHx2 shock. It's got a bigger air can, but I found out it doesn't fit on the aluminum frame. Like, you can probably make it fit, but I mean, it's probably like you got 1 or 2 millimeter distance, if that, between that crossbar and the shock can when it gets fully compressed. So that was another reason I went with the coil, and it solidified my decision to go with coil. If you have a carbon frame on the Stumpjumper, you can definitely go with DHx2 and 55, you know, stroke if you want. That's totally fine. I've seen guys do that, no problem. No clearance issues with the crossbar. So just some knowledge I learned online from doing all this research. Hope that helps. All right, let's get back to the installation part. Okay, got the shock out this morning. Let's put that shock onto there. I don't know if this looks a lot different or not. So right now, this is a 50 millimeter stroke shock. Curious to see once I put this one on. This one's a little bit bigger, it's 52.5. I want to see if this gap changes at all. Luckily this came off of a Stumpjumper Evo, and it has the same bushings, spacer bushings, so they look different but they're the same size. So I'm just going to try to pop this on there and see what happens. I think I just might have to do a little bit of adjustments. So one trick I found when you're putting this back on, leave it, don't over tighten it, like
and just let it have a little slack so you can adjust it, because this turns side to side, and when you put this link back onto the bike, it's not exactly like it can rub on the seat tube a little bit, so just let it, leave it a little loose, and then tighten it when it's on there. It's not, you've got some space to tighten this. Oh, another thing is, a lot of people might ask, hey, this is facing that way, and the orientation of that's a different way. That's how the shock goes into the frame. This one, for instance, is not lined up right now, so probably just needs to be moved just a little bit. Actually, I've got to do it like this way, right? So when my shock goes in, it's going to go like that. So obviously the bottom just needs to be turned. You can just rotate this bottom with your hands, or this one should be pretty easy with your hand, just to get the correct orientation that you need. So when you're putting the spacers back in for the flip chip, don't worry about if you put it wrong. Just make sure the back of the shock is where you want it. So I keep mine on low. If it's not on low, just flip it the other way, and it'll go back to where you need it to be. Let's go pop this thing in. I don't know if I need to adjust this more to get it on there. We'll see. So just doing a dry fit on this. I'm going to put a little bit of grease in here just to keep this thing lubed. Clean out these little brackets if you can, just to get any dirt out. It's a good chance to do that. Did a dry fit, popped this in there, and everything looks to be clearing fine. You can see it's got this. It's got a little bit less clearance than it did before. It is a slightly bigger shock. So let me get this all bolted up, and I'll set the preload for my sag. Just put a little bit of grease on the threads. Some part tools, just generic grease, so these don't get seized up on there. Alright, I don't have my tripod, so this is really explanatory. Just pick this back linkage up and then connect the bolts. So if you have a buddy to help you hold the linkage and do this, I recommend that. This is sometimes a two-person job to get these things linked up. Obviously you can do it by yourself. Just takes a little finesse. Oh, and another tip is when you're tightening this, I usually just kind of pull up on the back tire a little bit to let pressure off the linkage to make it a little bit easier to tighten. You don't want to have a lot of strain on the bolt as you tighten it, and it might not, it might put too much stress on the threads. So let's finish doing this part. All right, well the shock's on there now. I don't know if this looks a lot different or not. I can tell the gap between here and here. It is a little different, which is fine. There's room for a bigger shock, which is what the whole point of this was. I was gonna try a 55mm stroke, but was a little nervous because this is a 29er. I've got the Cascade, so this is like the magical thing here. This Cascade Link makes the whole suspension curve a little more progressive versus just straight linear curve. So with the coil shock and this, I think would be a great setup. I put a little bit more stroke on this one. So stock was 50mm. This is a 52.5mm stroke, just meaning it's just a little bit longer suspension travel. So with this one, let's just say this comes at 140 with the 29-inch wheels, and the Cascade linkage, I think it's about 145. So now with this here, I think it should make it about 150, 152. It's a little bit different with the 29er wheels versus the 27.5 wheels. Okay. Well, I set my sag. I use the bottom out bumper, just bring it back up to the top, sit on the bike really lightly, and let the bumper compress. And it's at like 0.6 inches, which is 30% sag on this, for whatever, 15 millimeters. Bottom half. But do your research, see what you need to do based on your body weight. I've got a 550 pound spring on here, just something a little bit firmer, I'm only like 165 with all my gear, so I probably don't need this quite this much spring rate, but you know, just hucking off big things. I just kind of want something a little more stronger to support the bike from bottom outs. But yeah, I'm super excited to go ride this, see how it feels. Heard a lot of great things about Coil Shock, so let's check it out. Thanks guys, hopefully this was helpful.